It was Sunday morning at 7:45 and a plane was flying from England to Spain. Shortly after takeoff, there was a sudden explosion in the cockpit, and the windshield shattered. As a result, strong winds rushed into the cockpit, breaking the cockpit door. All the passengers could see one of the pilots hanging out of the broken windshield. What happened next is part of the unbelievable story of British Airways Flight 5390. Friends, welcome to Mystery TV. On June 10, 1990, this plane was flying from Birmingham Airport in England to Malaga Airport in Spain. The plane in question was a 19-year-old BAC-1-11 aircraft. Friends, this plane hadn't flown for the past 27 hours because issues such as bubbles and other problems had been reported on the previous flight's windshield, and the plane had just returned from maintenance. On this flight, there were 81 passengers, 6 crew members, and 2 pilots on board. Speaking of the captain, 42-year-old Timothy Lancaster had over 11,000 flight hours of experience. The co-pilot, 39-year-old Alastair Aitchison, had over 7,000 flight hours of experience. According to the weather reports that day, it was a completely clear day with a light breeze. All the crew members and pilots knew each other, and everything was running smoothly. At exactly 7:20 a.m., the first officer took control of the flight and took off. After takeoff, the captain took over all the controls of the plane. At approximately 7:33 a.m., the plane was cruising at an altitude of 17,300 feet. The pilots relaxed, unbuckled their seat belts, and the crew members began preparing to serve drinks and refreshments. Speaking of seat belts, friends, the pilot's seat belts are different from the passenger's seat belts. Pilots are only allowed to unbuckle their shoulder belts. They unbuckle their lap belts only when they need to go to the washroom or take a break. At 7:33 a.m., the plane was passing through a waypoint at 17,300 feet when the flight crew suddenly heard a loud explosion. As 3 crew members rushed towards the cockpit door flew out towards the pilots, jamming in such a way that the pilots couldn't do anything. The crew members were shocked to see that First Officer Lancaster was hanging out of the windshield, with his legs caught in the seatbelt. Outside, the weather was extremely cold, and the cabin was undergoing rapid decompression. A flight attendant grabbed onto Lancaster's legs and sat down to hold him in place. Crew member Nigel Ogden, who was holding onto the captain's legs, realized that when the first officer was being pulled out of the windshield, the autopilot had been disconnected, causing the plane to descend rapidly. At this time, the plane was flying at a very high speed, and the temperature outside was -14 degrees. But due to the high speed, it felt like -43 degrees. Another issue was that planes at that time did not have emergency masks, so it was crucial to bring the plane to a breathable altitude as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, the captain was unable to communicate the situation to ATC due to the noise. Nigel was becoming exhausted, so other crew members took over holding him, and the first officer slipped another 5 centimeters out of the window, with his head repeatedly hitting the windshield. The crew members assumed that the first officer had already died, but the captain insisted on holding on to him. Finally, the pilot received clearance and permission to land at Southampton Airport. At 8:55 a.m., the plane landed. The first officer suffered from frostbite and was in shock, but he returned to service just 5 months later. Captain Aitchison, along with the cabin crew members, was highly praised for their courage and bravery, receiving many awards.